Hello, everyone. In this session, we will learn how to create tables, columns, and apply different types of column references before creating a window. Creating tables and columns is essential since they serve as the foundational elements of your user interface. Tabs are connected to tables, and fields are connected to columns. So, let's start. First, log in with the System Administrator role. Now, search for Database Schema in the menu, this one. Here, the first tab is Table/View. All the tables are defined in this tab. To create a new table, click New Record. Select it. Enter the DB table name here. The DB name is the name of the table in the database. The database name must be unique and always start with the module prefix. This module prefix helps in identifying which module the table or window belongs to. Now, enter the DB table name with the prefix. Prefix VA001 underscore the table name. The table name is student info. Next, enter the name of the table, student information. The name can be different from the DB table name and does not need any prefix. Now enter the description and comment related to this table here. Next is the active checkbox. This checkbox indicates that the record is active in the system. There are two methods to make records unavailable in the system. First, delete the record, or second, deactivate the record. A deactivated record is not available for selection. Always use deactivation instead of deletion because sometimes a record is referenced by another record. If you delete that record, it can create issues. Next is the View checkbox. This checkbox represents that this record entry is a view rather than an actual table. A view is always treated as read only in the system. If this checkbox is selected, then the fields or tabs bound with this table will be read only. Now, next is Data Access Level. Through the Data Access Level, we define who can access the data in this table. By default, it's System Only, which means access is granted at the system level. I set it to Client plus Organization. This means the user can access all the data in the company, but only for the organization they are assigned to. You can adjust it according to your needs. For example, organization, client only, system plus client, or all. Next is Maintain Changelog. If this checkbox is selected, all the changelogs will be maintained according to the value selected in the Set Changelog field. If I select it as all, then all changes are maintained, which includes new record insertion, updates to existing records, and deletion of records. If I select updates and deletes, then only updates and deletions are tracked. If the setting is none, then no changelog will be maintained. Next is Records Deletable. If this checkbox is selected, records can be deleted from the database. If records should not be deleted, then uncheck this checkbox. Now the next field is Record Type or Entity Type. Select the entity type according to your need. By default, it is user maintained. If you want this column to remain unaffected by any menu download, then set it to Other Customization. Now I will just save this record. Next is Create Columns from DB. If you have already created a column or table directly in the database, you can import it from the database. Make sure that the DB name you provide here matches the DB name you used in the database. If you directly created the table from the database schema, then click on Create Columns from DB. For example, I just click on it. A confirmation prompt will appear. Click on OK. The system will create 9 default columns: AD Client ID, AD Org ID, created by, updated by, is active, export ID, and primary ID. This process is now complete. Now go to the Column tab. Here you can see the 9 default columns. There is Client ID, Organization ID, created by, export ID, is active, updated by, and primary key. To create a new column, click on New Record, select it, and enter the column element. You can either use an existing column element or create a new one. For this table, I will create a new column element. For this, click on the 3 dots and then click on Zoom. It will take you to the column dictionary window. Select it and enter the DB column name, which is the database name of the column. It should be unique, with a prefix, without any spaces, and without any special characters. So, the DB column name is VA001 underscore student name. Now enter the name and print name, whatever you want it to be, without prefix, such as just student name. Save it and go back to the database schema window. Refresh it. Now search for your column element, V001 underscore student name. Enter the name, student name. You can either write a proper name like this, I entered student name, or you can enter any random characters and the system will automatically pick the name you entered in the column dictionary, like this one. Now select the reference from the reference field. The reference field signifies what type of column you are going to create or what type of value it contains in the database. It represents the display type of the column on the window and the data type of the column in the database. There are a number of references available here, but for this column, I will use the string reference type. The string reference type includes alphabets, numerics, and special characters. It will show as a text box control, and its maximum length is 255. But for this column, I set its length to 100. That means it can contain 100 characters. Next is default logic. This field is used when you want to set a default value for your column. For example, whenever a window opens, it will show that default value. You can either enter any random characters, and they will be visible as is on the window, or you can set any logical expression. All the logic-based and expression-related fields in this column tab will be explained verbally for now. Later, when we create the window for this table, we will practically perform all these logic-based fields with examples to show how they work, like this default logic, mandatory logic, read-only logic, and some more fields. We will use all these fields practically after creating the window. So, next is the key column. This indicates the primary key column of the table. If this checkbox is ticked, that means this column is the primary key of the table. For example, if I save this record, you can see this is the primary key of the table. As you can see, by default, this primary key checkbox is marked as true by the system. The parent link column checkbox is used to create a parent-child relationship between two tables. We will learn about its working later when we create a child table for this table. The mandatory checkbox makes a column mandatory at the database level. If this checkbox is true and the field for this column isn't visible on the UI, it will result in a mandatory error. Therefore, it's necessary to show the field on the UI if this checkbox is true on the column level. Next is mandatory UI. The mandatory UI checkbox is used to make the column mandatory at the UI level. This means if this checkbox is true and the field of this column is not visible on the UI, it will not affect anything or show any mandatory error. Mandatory logic is used to make a field mandatory based on certain logics or conditions. The updatable checkbox signifies that the field is updatable, meaning the user can change its value. Always updatable is used when a window or a tab is frozen after a process. You would tick this checkbox to make a particular field, or column remain editable even after the process has concluded. Read-only logic is similar to mandatory logic. Here, a field will be read only based on certain conditions. Its syntax is the same as mandatory logic. We will understand its syntax later when we create our window. The callout checkbox is used when you bind a callout. Then, you tick this checkbox and bind your callout code in the callout code field. Next is the identifier. The purpose of this identifier is to fetch the record directly from the reference table. To understand how this works, we will create a new column. First, click on New Record. Now, select the key column of the table from which you want to reference the data. For example, if we want to take a reference from the CB partner table, then we will use the key column of this table, which is CB partner ID. Select this one. Now you should enter the name. If you enter any random characters in the name field, the system will automatically correct it. After that, set the length as 20 and the reference as table direct. Then, save it. Now, the column in the CB partner table that has the identifier checkbox ticked, that column's value will be shown in our new column as a drop-down list. Now, if I want to retrieve data from another column of the same table, we will use the table reference. But in this case, we cannot use a key column because we are not able to use the same column element multiple times. It must be unique. So, to do this, we will create a new column element. First, go to the column dictionary and create a new column. You will enter the DB column name as a reference column name like ref partner ID because we want to fetch data from another column in the same table. In this case, the column element will be created like this. Here, we are just creating a reference ID. So the column DB name suffix is always ID, and the prefix is ref. Now you can enter the name and print text as partners. Save it. Go back to the database schema and click on New Record. You should refresh it before selecting Ref Partner ID. Now you need to enter the name and set the length to 20. The reference will be table. Here, you have to bind a reference key for your table reference. This is where you will specify from which column the data should be fetched. To create a reference key, you will zoom into the data reference table and click on New Record. Now, enter the data reference name with the prefix VA001 partners. You should select the validation type as table validation because our reference is table-based. If the reference were a list, you could use list validation, but for now, it is table validation. Save it and then go to the Table Validation tab. Click New Record and toggle it on. Now, in the Table or View field, you need to define the table from which data will be fetched, such as CB partner. You will then enter the primary key of this column, which is C_B partner_ID. After that, select the column whose data will be displayed in the dropdown as name. Save it and then go back to the database schema. You should refresh the reference key field. Now you can search for your reference key, VA001 partners, and save it. Now you can see the data validation field. This field will be visible when you select the reference type as a list, search, table, or table direct. This field is used to show valid entries according to the validation you have defined. That validation is defined under the code section when you zoom into the data validation. We will understand this later when we create our window. So now we will create one more column. For this, first go to the column dictionary and click on New Record. Enter VA001_gender and the name is gender. Then, save it. Go to the database schema and refresh it. Search for VA001_gender. You should now enter the name and set the length to 2. Our reference is a list. When your reference is a list, you have to bind the reference key here as well. So, zoom into the data reference table and click on New Record. Enter the name of the data reference, which is VA001_gender. Here, the validation type will be list validation because our reference type is a list. Save it and go to the List Validation tab. Click on New Record and toggle it on. Now you will search for the search key, and for male, you will enter M, save it. For female, you will enter F, and for others, you will enter O. Now, the length of this search key is directly proportional to the length you passed in the column. So, here you can see I passed the length as 2, but the search key is only 1 character. If I were to pass the length as 1, and the search key had 2 characters, it would show an error, saying, your list is not working. So, you should always remember that the search key length must be the same as the length you provided in the column section. Okay, now refresh the reference key field and search for your reference, which is VA001_gender. You can then save it. Now we have some constraint types. These indicate whether you should create foreign key constraints. There are mainly these types of constraints available. First, cascade. This is used if a record is going to be deleted from the parent table. Then, all its referenced records will be automatically deleted from the child table. The next is set null for null. It will set the reference ID to null in the child table if the reference record is deleted. Next, the restrict constraint type restricts deletion. That is, it will not allow you to delete the record if its reference exists in the child table. Finally, there is do not create. It will not create any constraint in the database. So our constraint type is either cascade or we can say set null. Save it. Next is the synchronization button. This button is used to sync the table and columns from the application dictionary to the database. When you go to the Table tab and click on Validate Table, you can see all the columns are in the application dictionary. We can send A through D columns but not database columns. To move these columns from AD columns to database columns, we have to click on the Synchronize button. To synchronize, you should select any one column and click the synchronization button. If you do not sync the columns, the window will not load properly. So, when I click on the Sync button, you can see that all the columns are synced automatically. This happens only the first time. After the first synchronization, if you create more or new columns, then you will have to select those columns and sync them one by one. Here is an example. After the first synchronization, I create one more column. First, I will create a column dictionary as VA001 age and save it. Now you should search for your column element here, which is VA001 age. The length is 3, and the reference type is integer. When I select the reference type as integer, it displays two more fields, minimum value and maximum value. For this column, you can set your minimum and maximum values. For example, I will set the minimum value as 18. This means that in this field, the minimum value is 18. If a value less than 18 is entered, it will give an error, a minimum value violation. Likewise, if I set the maximum value as 25, then any value greater than 25 will also show an error. For this time, I will just leave it. The reference type is integer. Save it. This reference type will show as a text box control. It specifies whole numbers and shows the default value as 0. Now you can save it. Now, I want to create one more column, VA001 marks, or we can say percentage. You should save it. On the next page, I will select the reference type as number. This will also show a text box control, and it will accept both numbers and decimals. Its default value is shown as 0.0. We have some more reference types available. First is account. It specifies the column as an accounting element and displays an account control. Next, the amount reference type also shows as a text box control, which accepts numbers with up to 2 decimal places. Its default value is 0.00. If you insert more digits after the decimal point, it will round off the value to 2 decimal places. The button reference type will show a button control on the window, used to perform actions like running processes and navigating from one tab to another. Finally, the cost plus prices reference will show as a text box control, and it accepts numeric values with decimal places. The minimum decimal places is 2, and the maximum is 12 decimal places. The date reference type shows a date type control and accepts the input as a date. Datetime also shows as a date control, but it accepts input as a date plus time. As I already described, integer will also show as a text box control, and it specifies whole number values. We already used the list reference type in our column earlier. Search will show a search control, which is a combination of a text box and an icon. When you click on the icon, an info window will open from where you can search for your record. Multi-search works the same as search control, but the difference is that it allows you to select multiple records from the info window. String is the same as the ones above. We also use table and table direct. Text shows as a text box control, and it is used to save string characters. The length can be up to 2,000 characters. Text long is the same as text, but its length is greater than 2,000. Time is used to accept time as input. URL is used to enter any URL link in the URL field. Yes/No is used to create checkboxes. These checkboxes are of the type yes or no. And that is all about the reference types. These are the different references available in the reference field. You can use them according to your needs. Now, when you go to the Table and View tab and validate the table, you will see that these two columns we recently created, age and percentage, are not synced in the database. So, to sync these columns, I will first select the percentage column and then sync this column. You can see that only the percentage column is synced into the database. To sync the age column, you have to select it manually and then click on the Synchronize button and then OK. Now it is also synced in the database. Our table and columns are ready. It is time to create our window. Let's begin.